Laissez les bon temps rouler. That is Cajun French for let the good times roll. This is the unofficial motto of Louisiana, shouted from the streets of New Orleans to the countryside of Church Point, Louisiana, every Mardi Gras season. But Mardi Gras was never just a party. It is a 300-year-old story of culture, survival, and community. As art students, we know that culture is never just a decoration. It is a story a community tells about itself. Mardi Gras is one of the most visual and culturally rich traditions in American history, shaping everything from costume design and parade art to music, food, and public ceremony. Understanding it means understanding how a people use creativity and ritual to define who they are and how they refuse to be forgotten. I have lived in Louisiana my entire life, born and raised in Lafayette, which is about 2 hours west of New Orleans. I've been raised on gumbo, red beans and rice, and multiple aspects of Cajun culture. Mardi Gras is a large part of Louisiana culture, which means it is a large part of who I am. Today, I will inform you about the history of Mardi Gras, its profound importance to Louisiana, and the striking differences between how two Louisiana communities, specifically New Orleans and Church Point, keep that tradition alive. First, we will explore the origins of Mardi Gras, how a 2,000-year-old tradition journeyed from ancient Rome to the shores of Louisiana. Second, we will step inside the celebration as New Orleans knows it. 1 million people, hundreds of floats, and a city that transforms itself into the greatest free show on earth. And third, we will travel 60 miles west to Church Point, Louisiana, where the same holiday looks completely different. Masked riders on horseback, a chicken chase, and a town that shares gumbo at the end of the day. Now, let's travel back more than 2,000 years to discover where it all began. Mardi Gras, which is French for Fat Tuesday, is a Christian holiday that is observed on the Tuesday before Ash Wednesday, the first day of Lent. According to the History Channel's 2023 overview of Mardi Gras history, the tradition of feasting before fasting for the season of Lent has roots stretched back well over 1,000 years within the Catholic Church. But scholars trace it even further to ancient Rome's spring festivals like Saturnalia, which were celebrations of excess and social inversion, the kind of deliberate, joyful disruption of the everyday that we as artists probably recognize as something deeply human. Over centuries, Catholicism has spread across Europe, and these pagan celebrations were folded into the liturgical calendar. The tradition took hold in France, Spain, and Italy, and then traveled with European colonists across the Atlantic. It was the Acadian settlers, the Cajuns, who carried the rural tradition of Courir de Mardi Gras to Louisiana's Cajun Prairie, where they immigrated to the region in the 1750s, bringing with them a custom handed down from medieval peasants who had practiced it for generations before them. The first recorded Mardi Gras in what would later become the United States happened on March 2nd, 1699. French explorer Pierre Le Moyne d'Iberville landed near present-day New Orleans on a date that fell on Fat Tuesday and named the site Pointe du Mardi Gras. The tradition took root in Louisiana soil from that very first day. Spanish colonial rule briefly suppressed celebrations in the 18th century, but when Louisiana eventually became a state in 1812, the traditions roared back to life. And by 1837, the first recorded street parade rolled through New Orleans. And since that moment, the parades have never really stopped. Today, Mardi Gras season in New Orleans draws over 1 million visitors and generates approximately $1 billion in economic activity each year, enough to rank it among one of the largest annual events in the entire country. Now that we know where Mardi Gras comes from, let's move on to our second point, and we will step inside the celebration as New Orleans experiences it. To understand Mardi Gras in New Orleans, you first need to understand crews. Crews are social organizations, some exclusive, some are open to the public, that design, fund, and produce the parades. According to Arthur Hardy, publisher of Arthur Hardy's Mardi Gras Guide, an annual resource covering New Orleans Carnival since 1977, there are over 60 active crews parading in New Orleans each season, with floats that can take an entire year to design and build. The traditional Mardi Gras colors, purple for justice, green for faith, and gold for power, were established by the Rex organization, one of the oldest crews, in 1872. As artists, we can appreciate this. These colors were not just chosen randomly. They were a deliberate visual language meant to communicate civic values to an entire city at once. From the float come throws, the beads, doubloons, stuffed animals, and specialty items that riders toss into the crowds. And then there is the king cake, a ring-shaped pastry decorated in purple, gold, and green with a tiny little plastic baby hidden inside. Whoever finds the baby is said to have good luck and, by tradition, has to buy the next king cake. King cake season runs from January 6th, the Feast of the Epiphany, all the way to Mardi Gras Day. So what you're seeing here is Mardi Gras as spectacle. Dr. Carolyn Ware, a folklore professor at Louisiana State University, writing in her 2001 study, Cajun Women and Mardi Gras, describes New Orleans Mardi Gras as a performance staged for and by the city itself, a grand public theatrical act of community identity. The floats are works of art, the costumes are handcrafted, the music is live, and for 2 weeks leading up to Fat Tuesday, New Orleans does not just celebrate Mardi Gras, it becomes Mardi Gras. More than 1 million people fill the streets on the final day alone. The city closes schools and businesses, the whole world watches, and when it is over, the city immediately starts planning for the next year. But now, let's move on to our third and final point, because 60 miles west of all of that, in a small Cajun prairie town called Church Point, Mardi Gras looks almost nothing like what I just explained. Church Point, Louisiana, population just under 5,000. No parade floats worth millions, no bead throws from masked riders on towering platforms. Instead, according to the Acadiana Parish Tourism Office, what happens here every year on the Sunday before Mardi Gras is called Courir de Mardi Gras, the Mardi Gras Run. And it is one of the longest running traditional careers in all of Acadiana. Here's how it works. Fully masked and costumed men assemble at dawn under the leadership of the captain, the only rider who goes without a mask. The captain's title is not elected. It is not rotated. It is held year after year until the captain chooses to relinquish it, and then he hands it down personally to the man of his choosing. The group rides on horseback from farmhouse to farmhouse across Acadia Parish. At each stop, the captain asks the homeowner for permission to enter. Once welcomed in, the masked riders sing, dance, and theatrically beg for food. The farmer throws a live chicken into the air, and the chase begins. The man who catches it is celebrated. Then they ride to the next farm, and then the next, and then the next. By the end of the day, the riders make their way into town, joining a parade of floats and trail riders. And when the sun goes down, every chicken caught that day goes into a communal pot, and the entire town shares gumbo. I have heard so many incredible stories about what it is like to experience Church Point Mardi Gras. Not only from my brother, who is 4 years older than me, but also my parents and my grandparents, and obviously my friends who have also experienced it. It is so deeply rooted into our culture as a state. It is another staple of what Mardi Gras is. The same way that the celebrations in New Orleans are also a staple of what New Orleans is and what Mardi Gras is really. Specifically, my friend Loren raves about her experience at Church Point this past Mardi Gras. She tells me about how fun it was to watch the chicken chases. They even got to experience a chicken chase, which was incredible. And just hearing from her about how she felt so deeply rooted with her community, with her culture, it's just something that's so beautiful, and it's something I admire so much. And I feel like that is something that is just so important to our state, because it shows how it's still alive. Our traditions are still alive and they're not going anywhere, which means a lot to me. And not only myself, but I feel like anybody who has grown up in Louisiana, who has had fear that our traditions will not last, seeing all of the generations who are coming up behind us, the generations before us, everybody continuing to practice these traditions, is just something that is so incredible, and something that I have loved watching and being able to experience. In conclusion, we traced the origins of Mardi Gras from ancient Rome festivals through Catholic Europe and across the Atlantic to Louisiana riverbank in 1699. We stepped inside the New Orleans celebration, the $1 million floats, the crews, the king cakes, the millions of people filling the streets of the French Quarter on Fat Tuesday. And we traveled to Church Point, where masked riders on horseback chase chickens from farm to farm. A captain leads without a mask, and the whole town shares a gumbo that everyone had a hand in catching. Same holiday, same state, two completely different expressions of the same 300-year-old soul. And that is what is so incredible about Louisiana. It is a melting pot of so many different cultures, and we see how it all feeds into each other when it comes to Mardi Gras. There are so many different celebrations, but at the end of the day, it is important to continue not only talking about the traditions of Mardi Gras, but continuing to practice it. I love sharing the stories of the Mardi Gras I have experienced and the Mardi Gras I am looking forward to experience in the future with my friends that I've met at SCAD who have never heard of Mardi Gras, who are just so fascinated by it. And I feel like it all ties back to the real meaning of laissez les bon temps rouler, which is not just to let the good times roll, but to make sure that they keep rolling. Long after I am gone, my parents are gone, my grandparents are gone, the next generation is gone, to ensure that this tradition never dies. Great.